Welcome to the Fiscally Awesome podcast. I'm your host, Matt Gardner, co-founder and CEO of Hiline. Today on the podcast, we have Eli Portnoy, founder and CEO of BackEngine, multi-time founder. Eli's got some great perspective on customer feedback and how to use it to build a better business. And I am excited to have the conversation. Let's get into it. Okay. Eli, welcome to the Fiscally Awesome pod, man. Happy to have you here.
Happy to be here. Really appreciate it. And yeah, it's going to be fun.
Yeah. So we're going to have some fun. Before we get into some of the content, why don't you just give the audience who is Eli? What have you done in your career? You're a multi-time founder. You've done some cool stuff. And most recently with BackEngine. So give us the TLDR on who you are and where you've been.
Yeah. So at this point, I guess the serial founder, serial entrepreneur tag probably applies to me, but never really set out to do that. Just got very excited about the idea that with a little bit of technology and a few people in a room, you could build something new and exciting and interesting, and started my first venture-backed company in 2011. I was at Amazon and I had this idea. It turned out to be a very bad idea, but I wanted to build a tool to help small businesses price more intelligently. So the basic idea was we're going to come up with an AI tool to help automatically forecast if a SMB, like a restaurant or a hair salon, is busy or slow. And when they're slow, we're going to go and basically leverage these new mobile ads that we were seeing all over and basically try to show the coupons to people who are nearby that store. So if it was 3:00 and a restaurant was really empty, we would automatically know that and trigger ads to people nearby and say, hey, here's $3 to go for lunch. Turned out to be a horrible idea because the reason people don't eat lunch at 3 isn't because it's expensive, it's because they're not hungry. But it was a good lesson for me in validating ideas. And it also unlocked a really interesting insight, which was that part of the idea was we were going to basically create these automatic ads. And that meant that we were going to rely on these ad networks who all said they could do location-based ads on mobile, which made a lot of sense. The iPhone was now a couple of years old and they all had GPSs in them. And why else would you advertise on a tiny little screen if not that it has location capabilities and you can do some cool stuff with that? But none of the networks could actually do that. They just could not show our ads anywhere near we wanted them to. And so we said, that seems like a pretty big opportunity for us to go solve. And so we pivoted out of that original idea and just focused on being ad tech infrastructure for location-based ads, caught incredible tailwinds. And within 18 months of starting that business, we were acquired by a company called Telenav. That was really the beginning of my journey. And, one of the things that was really great about the acquisition is that I got to stay on and lead that through another couple of phases of growth. And we ended up getting to a pretty decent size and got to experience what it felt like to scale a business. When my 2 years there were up, I left and I started my next company, which was called Sense 360. And the basic idea around Sense 360 was, hey, at ThinkNear, we saw all this location data because every time we showed an ad, we saw the location. What if we could use that location data to power real-time consumer insight dashboards? What if we could sell all this data in an anonymized, aggregated way to a McDonald's and a Coke and basically the biggest chains in the world to help them understand who are their customers, how often are they coming, where else are they going, and all sorts of stuff like that. So we started working on that. And this time we didn't quite have the same tailwind. So it didn't take us a year and a half. We were at it for 6 years, and up 30 of the top 50 restaurant chains and a bunch of other really big brands. And ultimately were acquired by a company called Medallia. And there were a couple of lessons that I learned because we didn't have those tailwinds. We had to execute at a very high level. And the thing that I think saved us throughout the entire journey was that I was obsessed with our customers. I wanted to know as much about them as I could, as much about each of their needs, why they were buying us, why they weren't buying us. And I kept getting frustrated because when we were a small little company, it was super easy for me to hear all that. I knew those customers intimately well. But then as we started to scale and get bigger, I felt further and further disconnected from those customers. And I had to build all these systems and processes to try and get that information. And it was super valuable. It really made the business grow. We had multiple near-death scares and we were able to get out of them because we knew we were so focused on that customer, but it was just hard. And when Medallia acquired us, they were this voice of the customer tool that basically helps B2C companies run surveys to understand what their customers care about. And I saw that and I said, there's no equivalent in B2B. And there's a lot of reasons why that's the case. There's an opportunity to go build that. And so I left Medallia 2 years after the acquisition and started BackEngine. And the basic idea around BackEngine is, given that B2B businesses spend so much time talking to their customers, they have account management teams and CS teams and implementation teams and professional services, and their calls and emails and all sorts of stuff. How do we use large language models to ingest all of that information, analyze it, and basically give companies this incredible superpower that only startups have, which is this intimate understanding of absolutely everything customers need and want and care about to help really power the rest of the organization. So that's what I've been working on for the last couple of years.
Man, you're speaking my language. We're on this journey right now. It's everything has AI embedded in it now, and we've accumulated we have tech debt, just like everybody else does. We have lots of disparate systems. None of it talks to each other, and we're going through this process of getting our data infrastructure in place and just trying to learn as much as we possibly can about our customers, because our customers leave fingerprints. Just anybody would use a piece of technology. It's just harder for a services company to be able to capture it. It's not built into a lot of the solutions and the way that people work. And I don't know that services organizations have thought about it the same way, but that we're on that same journey right now. So I love that. We're going to talk a lot about that. But before we get into the fun stuff about the platform and CS and CX, our whole thing on the podcast is we're trying to help founders, operators, if you're a nonprofit executive directors, just start to turn on the finance side of their brain a little bit more and understand the power it can unlock, and having the security, the know-how to make good capital allocation decisions. So on the finance side of it, I know secondhand, just from talking to our friend Katie O'Brien, that you've placed a lot of stock in setting up the right finance and accounting infrastructure from day one, because you need good information organization. What's your approach to finance and accounting? What are the things that you think? You said you had a couple of near-death scares in a prior company. How did you lean on finance and accounting in that side of the business to help you through those moments?
Finance is such an interesting piece in building a company, because it's not, in the early days, it doesn't feel like a strategic thing to be focused on. Like, you just need to focus on your product and your customers. But I learned the hard way, because we were acquired really early on at ThinkNear. And when we started to go through that acquisition, we weren't quite as robust there as we possibly could have. And that made everything harder. It made the acquisition harder, fundraising harder. And it also just made me have a harder time managing the business and making strategic choices. And so I learned really early on that it might not be strategic on day one, but it's strategic to actually put it in place on day one, so that as soon as you need it, it's in place, because it's a really hard thing to spin up. The more history and mess that you've created, the harder it is to spin up. And so I found in company number 2 that if we spun it up literally on day one, it was not a big lift at all, even though it may not have been the most strategic thing to focus on when we didn't have anything else. It was so easy to set up because there was no baggage at all. And once we set it up, it was easy to keep on and going. And then when we did need it, it was incredibly powerful for us. And so it was one of those things that, like a gift that just kept on giving. And so for company number 3, it was just let's get this set up on day one. Let's invest in it. Let's make sure that we are operating like a real business. And it's been amazing. It's easy to set up, and now it runs. And now I can make all sorts of better decisions. I can run the business better. I can allocate capital. I can think about where we want to make investments. I can think about when I need to fundraise. I can be on top of this stuff. But I tell first time founders all the time, because they're really reluctant. They're like, I'm just going to do my financials in Excel. I'm going to put together what my expenses are, and I can see my bank account. I know how much I'm spending each month. I'm like, you're thinking about it wrong. And you're also creating a lot of pain for yourself in the future.
Yep. Creating debt. Yeah. Finance is just like customers. You have data on your customers. Finance is also a big database, right? So you want to have that clean. It's not critical to your business all the time, but it is essential to your business. It's one of the foundational pillars that you just kind of have in place to run a sound, responsible business and make good decisions. Why do you think it's so easy for first-time founders I'm just going to do it later, or I'm going to do it in Excel? Do you think they're playing ostrich, or kind of burying their head in the sand? I don't understand this. I don't want to deal with it. Or do you think they really just don't think it's valuable?
I think it's probably a combination of, they don't realize how much more painful it will be to set up later than to just set it up now. They are thinking about urgent versus important, and there are other things that are more urgent. And I think just generally they haven't been scarred by what it feels like not to have that in place. I really just think, though, by far the biggest is, if they knew how easy it was to set up on day one, most people would just do it.
compared
Like
to, yeah.
there really is not a reason not to, but it's not urgent. So they just don't. We'll do it later. It'll be fine. It'll be easy.
Yeah, like you're like month 18, it's really tough to set it up because you got to go back and figure out what you did for the last 18 months. And it's really disruptive.
Yeah. And now you have a whole bunch of processes in place around how you're running your business. And like you now need to weave in these other, it just, yeah, it's messy.
That's right, man. It's all systems. It's all systems and it's all data. And you want to make sure it all goes into the right systems at the right times. So you can use it when you need to. So third company, obviously you set it up very early. For day one at BackEngine, how has it evolved just in a 2-year period? I'm just trying to give folks perspective on how the life cycle of a business evolves your finance and accounting needs and what you lean on it for.
Yeah.
It can change
So,
quickly.
oh, for sure. So when we first started, we just wanted to track expenses. We wanted to make sure that every expense was categorized. And I wanted to get into the sort of like ritual and habit of having a monthly financial report that I was looking at. It just needed to be part of my day. And at first it was really simple. We had 5 or 6 expenses a month and there was nothing really there. Like we got into the habit and then we started to build a little bit more process around our AP and figuring out, okay, how are we going to approve this stuff? And we started to bring on team members. And so how are we going to do expenses? And just making sure that if you do it up front, it's so simple and easy. It probably took me less than an hour or two to just make sure this stuff was on and it was working with you guys and just having it set up for me. That was easy. And then we started to generate revenue. And then we had to start thinking about an AR function and making sure that we knew how to invoice folks and collect. And then we started to realize that not everyone paid their invoice the moment they got it. Thinking about AR aging and basically a reminder system. And so it evolves, but it evolves so naturally and so easily. And it just avoids a whole bunch of mistakes. Yeah, and I'm sure as we keep getting bigger, we're going to have even more things that we need to think about. And by the way, you guys also have been helping us on the HR side. So we use Rippling. And so administering that and making sure that's tight and in a good place. Like all of this stuff feels big company, except when you're a small company, you can keep it really lean, but just having it makes you go faster in every other dimension. Like I don't have to think about accounting. I don't have to think about finance. I don't have to think about HR. I don't have to think about all of these things, which means that because I spent 2 hours up front doing it, I now have all those hours back where I can spend on the product and the customers and the business, which is awesome.
I love it, man. What a plug. Well, we appreciate your business. So just on that topic, since you brought it up, so why Hiline? Like, why make that choice?
So when I was first getting set up, I was going to work with the firm that we used at Sense 360 and they were great. And it was a really great partnership, but they weren't ready to work with us at the earliest of stages. Like their business model just didn't align. And so it would have been a lot of money and you guys were really flexible and made it really easy to get started. And then as soon as I started working with you guys, I was really pumped about 2 things specifically, 3 things actually. The team was awesome. I really liked everyone I was working with you guys. You guys scaled with us really nicely. It was like, oh, we need to do this. Yes, we've got a team that can help you with that. We need to add AR agent. We can do that. We need to do this other thing. You can do that. And so it felt like we could scale with you guys really well. And then the third thing is you guys are investing in a lot of tech, which was surprising to me. I didn't realize, and that might be more of a Hiline thing than I calculate. And that may have been why I didn't know upfront. But since the merger, it's been really nice to see all the new tools that you guys are putting in place and even just like being able to access my financials in real time and see how things are going. There's just been a lot of really neat things around that.
I love it. So Ellie and I were having a conversation about Digits, which is something that we give all of our clients now. Can we just do a quick plug for our friends at Digits in terms of what that's been like for you and what you like about it?
Yeah, it's very rare that I see a product or a technology that's like doing something that lots of people have tried and have done so poorly at, and then come in and just be like, this is so well built. It's just slick. It lets me answer the questions I have quickly. The data's all there. It's super accessible. It's like what I feel like Mint was trying to do on the personal finance side, but like times 100 on the business, which is even more important to me. And so I have questions. I want to know exactly how much we spent. Everything is just there for me. And it's just so easy to access.
I love that. Digits will appreciate that too. Before we move off of Highline, so can you share maybe one example of a moment that mattered to you or we helped make it a real impact on your business? Like one piece of advice or one thing that we've been able to do together in the last 2 years?
There are a few of them. I think on the like accounting finance side, definitely when we started to invoice customers and started to generate revenue, basically spinning up an entire process for how we were going to do that and how I was going to have visibility around it, how we were going to make sure that it was quick and smooth. And at this point, basically all I do is when we sign a contract, I forward it to the team with the contract and everything just gets spun up. They're invoiced at the right time. Follow-ups are sent. I get an AR aging view, so I know exactly what that looks like. And that was in my past life where I didn't set that up front. That was like a huge thing where it was like messy and crazy and we were missing stuff. And this has been really smooth. So that was really cool. And then also now when we hire people, like we hired someone in Hawaii, and in the past I would have just tried to manage it myself, but it's actually like quite burdensome to hire someone in Hawaii. I had no idea, but like everything around making sure the insurance is in the right place and making sure that we've got all of the like state permits and all of that, it just would have been a pain. It would have taken me off the product and it was just super simple.
Shout out to Ellie's Hiline team. So keep doing good work for him at BackEngine. And I want to talk about BackEngine, man, because I am also customer obsessed like you. So what about customers and customer success in that function? What really gets you out of bed in the morning? What do you love about it?
So there's a bunch of things. So the first thing is I don't believe that the customer is always right, but I do believe that customers are always insightful. And what I mean by that is as a product leader, a product manager, you can't just blindly follow what customers are saying because they don't always have all of the context and they're not always spending as much time as you are thinking about where you want to take this. But everything they say is valuable, and understanding it and knowing what they're saying and being able to quantify it and being able to have a real systematic way of looking at what those customers are saying is, I think, incredibly powerful. We've done actually a whole bunch of research and just basically we reached out to 150 SaaS businesses and we asked them a whole bunch of questions around how they're collecting and disseminating and accessing customer feedback. And then we asked them a whole bunch of questions around performance, like how are you doing on retention? How are you doing on growth? How are you doing on competitiveness, win rate, all of that stuff? And what we found is there is a very stark and clear correlation between the companies that take feedback more seriously just outperform the companies that don't take it more seriously. One of the stats that I thought was interesting is companies where CEOs are talking to customers on a monthly basis or more frequently dramatically outperform companies where the CEO is not talking to customers as frequently.
Mm-hmm.
And so to me, it's such an obvious thing. If you can hear your customers, you will do better. You will spot the risks. You will spot the opportunities. You will see the product initiatives that you should focus on. You could find where the gaps are and the pain points are. You just end up building a better business. And so that gets me up at night every single day. It's the way I've operated. We used to talk about at Sense 360, we were building 20-year partnerships. We were not building like customer relationships that were going to last a couple of years. Every single one of them, we wanted to think of them as lasting 20 years because I love to cruise. And when I go on a cruise and you know you're going to see people for 7 days and never again, you behave with each other differently than you do with your neighbor who just bought a house next to you and is going to be there for a really long time. And I wanted to make sure that as a company, we were thinking of our customers as these long-term partners, that we were going to focus less on value extraction and more on value creation. And the only way I knew how to do that was to get really close to those customers and make sure that we really cared about what they said. So it's been an ethos since day one for us.
I love that. So I love what you said, like the customer isn't always right, but the customer is always insightful. How do you think about that in terms of like product market fit, right? That knowing how to balance those two things, I think is how you win, is like extracting those insights, but making it real and making it into a business or product.
Yeah, it's hard. And that's where there's a little bit more art than science.
Yep.
So I think the science is making sure you know what your customers are saying. And it's not just like anecdotally, like I think customers are saying this. It's like, I know that this feature request has come up 23 times. And I know that this bug has come up 10 times. And I know that in general, my happier customers are saying this, where my unhappier customers are saying this. And I know what churn looks like because I can predict it, because I understand the drivers of it, because I've been hearing from my customers. So to me, that's all science. The interpretation of that, though, is a little bit more art. So knowing what questions to ask, making sure that you are focusing on the right features, even though they're maybe not coming up as much, but will actually solve some of the underlying needs that they're talking about. So there is a lot of art to it. But you can't do any of the art if you don't have the science.
Right.
The art happens on top of that science. And what I find is that most companies are really bad at the science of collecting feedback. I'll give you one example. When we asked those 150 SaaS businesses, who owns customer feedback in your organization? 23% of them said no one. So there's no one at the company. If you ask someone like, who owns this really important, critical thing? No one. And then 50 something percent, I think it was 53% said it was the customer success team. But I actually think that's a red herring because the customer success team is the team that's generally talking to customers most frequently. And so as a result, it's like their de facto responsibility to bring that back to the rest of the organization. But I've never met a CS leader who was hired based on their ability to collect customer feedback. I've never seen a customer success leader be measured or gold on their ability to bring that customer feedback back. And all too often, I see customer success leaders who don't have a seat at the leadership table or at the board table or the board meeting because people don't really see them as like really owners of customer feedback. And to me, that's a massive miss. Like these CS leaders should be empowered to really invest and build towards collecting this customer feedback. And then they should have a real seat at the table to be the voice of the customer in every strategic decision. Just like the CFO should have a seat at the table because they are driving the financial strategy of the business. The CS team should be partnering with the executive team to do that for the voice of the customer, and partnering with product and partnering with marketing, partnering with all these folks. And that doesn't really happen. So I think the science doesn't really happen because it's just a name only. And too many CEOs say, I love my customer, but then don't build the infrastructure to actually know what the customer wants, cares, and needs.
Yep. I think that's all really well said. Can we nerd out on our business for a little bit?
Yeah, let's do it.
On our industry. So one of my passions about this industry, right? Like accidental accountant, I did it for a long time. I've never really loved the work, but I love the problem, right? I love the industry just being really stale, that you can make it interesting. So we have this industry that was born out of compliance, right? Like usually accounting started with audits and tax work, and it was regulated. Like you had to be in the club, you had to be credentialed to do the business, which meant CS didn't really matter. Someone's telling you got to buy the thing, you only can buy it from certain people. And I don't think that CS ever really got a seat at the table because they didn't have to. With technology, you started to be able to do more outside of the regulation fence, right? Like outsourcing finance and accounting is now this really interesting industry opportunity that's being pursued by a lot of the same folks that learned only how to operate in a regulated space. So now, like BackEngine, you don't have to hire Hiline. You actually don't even have to get it done this way. You could do it yourself, or you could bring in somebody internally. So your expectation is that you get good service now because you're a willing buyer. You're buying something that you chose to in a free market. And I think a lot of the competitors and companies in this space, there's 90,000 companies that try to do what Hiline does. I watched them struggle because they have only experienced one thing. They've never experienced what it's like to have to provide real CS, and just doing the bookkeeping and just doing the accounting and tax work is table stakes. And that's not actually CS. That's not actually listening to your customer and asking them what they care about, what's their pain. Their pain is not bookkeeping. Their pain really probably roots in something else. And I think it's hard for a lot of folks that have never experienced anything different to know how to dig at it and action on what the customer is saying to you. So I say all that, that's you've met Amanda before from our team. She's done a lot of stuff in the business, but we're giving Amanda that baton and agency to go out and build a separate CX function to make sure that we can capture the voice of the customer and try to get better at it. But it's really interesting industry, man. Like product market fit was thrust upon them because of compliance. And it's rare, I think, if you went out and you polled customers and asked them what they cared about and what they wanted, they have a lot of pain points, and they probably would prefer to get information not in the format of a balance sheet and a P&L. They probably would prefer to get it in like the way that you get it in digits because it's a little bit more approachable. But accountants are kind of like, no, you got to do it this way because that's like the way the book says you got to do it. And they don't really take the feedback from the customer the same way. So I don't know if this is like resonating. It's like a really interesting problem set, man, in the industry, professional service industry. So when you hear that as a customer focused guy, what comes to your mind? What does that make you think about?
Well, it makes me think of a couple of things. It makes me think that on the one hand, if there are 90,000 firms, and that means that the service itself, the product itself is somewhat commoditized, And you really have to differentiate on
Yep.
the experience. And if you're going to differentiate on the experience, you really need to be listening to those customers and optimizing that experience around every single touch point. Yes, are the financials that we're sending you good, but how are we interacting with you? How are we collecting the data from you? How are we disseminating the data? Where are the pain points? Where do we need to invest? When is the team getting overloaded when response rate starts going down? These are all part of the experience that become way more important in a world where the service itself is commoditized. But I think the second thing that I hear is it's an industry that's evolving, which means that even if the first main product that the industry evolved around is commoditizing, there are all these new adjacent things that you can do. You have a very privileged seat as like a strategic advisor to the company. And as a strategic advisor, you have other services, other products, and knowing how to evolve and where to evolve also requires like really deep listening to the customer to know where are their opportunities, where are their pain points, how is this landing with them, where do I think about investing further? And it feels to me like in the service business, even more than in a SaaS business, you really need to be listening to the customers. And my guess is, at least from what we've heard from some of our services customers, is it's even harder to collect the data because you have multiple actual service providers interacting with the customer. So it's not just like CSMs that are talking to the customer or trained and customer first. You also have accountants and bookkeepers, all these other folks. And so how do you make sure that you are aggregating all of that and making sure that they're listening for these signals and hearing them and then routing them back? And then how do you aggregate them? So it's actually almost an even harder problem to get that science piece in place.
Nailed it, man. You nailed it. It's a really fun problem to work on, honestly. But what you're doing at BackEngine, I want you to talk about the platform and what you integrate with. Because I looked at it, like a lot of the tools we use, and I'm sure a lot of other companies do. But yeah, that's exactly right. Because there's a lot of humans talking to a lot of customers. It's hard to capture fingerprints. And what I mean by fingerprints is if you have a software platform, you're tracking logins, you're tracking how much time people spend on the platform, you're tracking what they're doing on it so you can understand what people get value. And it's really hard to do that in a services company because you don't always have something to track fingerprints. It's harder to do. But that's where the magic comes in, man. Like you said, we use a lot of technology. We use technology for the exact reason that you described. We're trying to differentiate. We're trying to be able to capture fingerprints for our customers and make sure that they can have the best experience possible. So I love that you got it like immediately. Just like even articulated it way clearer than I did. So well done, man.
This customer feedback stuff is something I think about all day long, every single day. And it's in a way, it feels like we're almost evangelizing an industry because, well, lots of people care about it and talk about it. There really hasn't been a programmatic way to do it. And partially it's because you needed LLMs to be able to do this kind of stuff. And so a lot of time I think about like, where is feedback going and what does this look like as a category? And so it's a fun topic.
Super fun topic. So can you go a little deeper on BackEngine? What is the platform? If you log into it, what do you see? What do you integrate with? And how do you pull all the parts of the data together to make it usable?
Yeah, absolutely. So the basic architecture, if you will, or the basic way it works is we authenticate to the tools that the company's using to talk to customers. So generally that means like if they're recording video calls, we'll plug into their existing video recorder, we'll plug into their email system, we'll plug into their ticketing system. If they're using Slack to talk to customers, we'll plug into Slack. We'll basically try to plug into wherever they are talking to those customers. And what a lot of the infrastructure that we had to build was how do you map a conversation to a customer? Because we're not ingesting internal conversations. We're not ingesting interactions with partners or vendors, or we're really looking at prospects and customers. And we want to make sure that we understand all of the metadata around each of those interactions. And so we're analyzing every single one of those interactions, and we're looking for the things that matter to the different folks on the team. Because one of the insights we had around customer feedback is there isn't just a single channel of feedback that matters to everyone. Like you probably care about competitive positioning and churn risks and things that are strategic. Whereas like someone like Kathy probably cares a lot about, are there people who are really happy, who are telling us why they're happy and who I should maybe bring on a podcast or do some co-marketing with? And your product team is probably thinking about, is anyone experiencing like issues and bugs, or are there pain points in their workflows, or are there opportunities for feature requests? So everyone's got like different lenses that they apply to the feedback. And so what we do is we look at each one of those interactions across a bunch of different lenses, pull out the things that matter to the different teams. And then the way we expose it is in a couple of different ways. So the first way is we give you a centralized repository of all of that information. We create a taxonomy around it. We organize it. We let you access it through a whole bunch of visual tools. So you can trend it, you can chart it, you can chat against it, you can do all sorts of stuff and analyze it. But then we also give you a feedback loop where you can say, these are the three things I care about. And anytime those things happen on a customer conversation, you're alerted to it. So the product team can say, I want to know if there's any feature requests. And the CS leader can say, I want to know if there's any budget concerns. And that way they can be like, to have their ear to the ground across all conversations and just hear the things that they care about. And so that's the basics of the product. What we're finding is that we are driving outcomes in a few different ways. The first one is we're helping coach at scale. So CS leaders and generally like leaders can see what's happening across these interactions and find the coaching moments. And then they can build automated workflows to make sure that they're able to resolve issues if they come up. We're finding that we're able to help a ton around just like executive level visibility and basically visibility for anyone who's not on every one of these interactions. We're able to help build scalable playbooks so that you can figure out what works and what doesn't work and actually incorporate that into the business. We're helping to identify churn risk. We're helping upsells, new product development. It's just a lot of outcomes that come from getting this part of the stack in a good place.
So you said simple. So it's not simple. Like what you just said is that is your whole business in a box. Whether you have a product or platform or a service, that's been really difficult for people to access historically. I would venture to guess most companies have no idea, zero
No, they
idea
don't.
what their customers think about their service.
They think they do. Everyone thinks they do. There's some weird bias where everyone thinks they know their customer really well. But when you ask them like about their process, their structure, like what data they're doing, like everyone's is broken and there's tons of surprises. But the two things I hear most often are, I already know everything there is to know about our customers. Like I know, I can't tell you how many times this happened. And there isn't a single customer that we've ever integrated with who isn't just absolutely shocked by how much they were missing and how many opportunities were there that they just didn't understand. But I guess that's just how we're wired as humans.
Yeah. Is that typically what happens? Like you plug them in, you get them set up, they start to chart and dashboard customer sentiment and it's lower than they thought it was?
Yeah, the sentiment is lower. The reasons why sentiment is lower are different from what they thought. The number of times things are coming up. We have one customer who basically told us that their super user is their CTO because the CTO basically set up a subscription in Slack so that any bug is basically coming in through there. And immediately he's like, these bugs are tiny. They're super easy to fix. And like, I had no idea how much pain they were causing. And they just started cranking out fixes for them. And like in the past, the CSM was like signaling to the product manager that there was a bug and the product manager was prioritizing against all this stuff. And like, it was never getting to the engineering team. So the engineers had no idea that there were all these little tiny things that they could just crank out that were causing so much pain. And now they know, and now they've got a real-time feedback loop around it. And now the product's just elevated and the experience is elevated and like they didn't know. And executives are the same thing. Oh my God. Yeah. Budget constraints are like real. I thought it was just an excuse. We have to think about our pricing and we have to think about how we're going to do bundling. And there's just all these things that come up. And it's like, I think the corollary to finance is really strong. You think you know how you're doing because you have a good sense of how much you're spending every month because your bank account is going down by a certain amount. But until you actually have the systems in place to recognize where you're spending it and how it's doing compared to budget, and where you're over, where you're under, and you start realizing you have so many levers and you have so much more control than you anticipated. It's the same thing with customer feedback.
Yep. And I would say like customer sentiment is a leading indicator to financial performance.
I think that's probably right.
So churn doesn't happen immediately. Like it's not usually people, they don't have a bad experience today and they get off your platform or your service today. It usually takes, how long does it take? Do you have an opinion on this? I feel like it's not immediate. There's a lagging implication to like a bad product or service.
I think that's right. And one of the things that's been surprising in our data is what we see is actually the most immediate leading indicator, the one that happens right before churn, is they go quiet. So it's like people are loud and they start complaining and then they stop complaining. They just stop. And everyone gets into a lull thinking, oh, things are better
Feel
now.
good.
And actually,
Yeah.
no, they're worse. They're just disengaging. And then the churn happens. And
Yep.
so, yeah, I don't know the exact timing. I think it probably depends on the business, but
Yeah.
there's a little bit of time.
That's an interesting point, right? So I think sometimes no news people perceive it as good news. If you don't hear from your customer, oh, they just must be happy. It's actually quite the opposite. And we work with our team on this all the time. We're not unique. I think this is like an every business problem. When you don't hear from your customers, it's like when you probably should send them an email, Slack them, or call them, because if you're
Yes.
noticing that you haven't talked to them recently, there's probably a reason why that you need to dig into. Don't just be okay with it. Maybe it would be easier if you just let it go, right? Maybe you work less hours in that day because you got less people to talk to, but you got to make sure you want to drive as much engagement as possible. Good engagement, that's
Yeah.
good. If they're talking to you a lot, that's a good thing, generally speaking.
Yeah. Even if they're complaining, because if you're complaining and you're hearing it and you can fix it, you can do something about it. But they stop talking to you.
Yeah, they
They just
care
don't
enough.
care.
They still care enough to tell you.
Yeah.
So I love that, man. Okay. Okay. So we hit a lot of topics, man. We hit finance, we hit CX, we talked back engine. So what else on technology do you think we haven't covered? We talked about AI, like you talked about how important AI is to be able to enable this type of product or platform. Anything else on that you think we should hit that you think is relevant?
The only other thought I have is that I think operationally, companies need to really rethink almost every aspect of their operations. I go back to my days at Amazon, and one of the things that was so fascinating about getting to work there, it's a tough place to work, but every single piece of that business was intentional and thoughtful. The way they hired, the way they goaled, the way they measured stuff, the way they did reviews, everything was thoughtful and intentional, and frankly, pretty different from any other company. And I'm trying to take that same lens because if I do things the same way I did at ThinkNear or at Sense 360, I'm leaving a massive opportunity on the table. So everything from how we like collaborate internally to how we're updating each other to how we're building product, like I'm really trying to take that AI lens and say, okay, don't just do this because it's the way I've done it. Let's really think, is this the optimal way to do it, given that we've got this incredibly new technology with AI? And that's actually, I think, accelerated us pretty dramatically. It's been a really fun sort of series of experiments to have, or thought experiments.
I agree. I think we're leaning into the model that we're just AI first for everything. We have to, you too, we're still small enough. Like we're actually, I think it's a gift to be still at a pretty subscale place where you can strip it down and rebuild it. It's still disruptive, but not nearly as disruptive as like Amazon stripping down their business and trying to rebuild
Yeah.
around technology. It's a little scary and disruptive, and change is obviously hard on organizations, but I think it's necessary and it's inevitable. It's just a function of how quickly is it going to put you at a disadvantage because you didn't move fast enough. And I don't think anybody actually knows. Is it 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years? I mean, some people, everybody's got a different opinion, but if you don't make the change and rethink it, like you said, I think you're going to be having a really hard time competing at some point down the road.
I think so too.
All right, man. So can we wrap it up with some rapid fire, some fun questions?
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's do it. Okay. What's your favorite cruise line? You said you're a
Ooh,
cruiser.
yeah.
Do you do different ones?
Yeah. I mean, we've done like maybe 5 or 6 over the last 10 years or so. I'd say I like Royal Caribbean because that's where we go with the kids. That's what they like. And yeah, it's lots of stuff for them to do.
Yeah, we're taking our kids on a cruise in October, Royal Caribbean cruise for the first time. They've never been on
Amazing.
one before, so that's
You're
interesting.
going
That's
to
funny.
love it.
They're gonna love it, man. It's like one of the new big boats, like the Star of the Seas or something. I think it's pretty new, so they're looking forward to that.
Amazing.
Favorite book for a founder or anybody running a business to read?
Yeah, I think it has to be Hard Things About Hard Things. The Ben Horowitz book, like that is probably the realest book I've read where I've read it 3, 4 times at this point.
Hard Things. I have not read that yet. I've
Oh,
heard of it.
really? Oh,
I
you
have not
have
read
to.
it, so I'm going to
It's
read it. That's
incredible.
next. Okay, I love that. Hard Things About Hard Things. So I look at your resume, man. You literally took no operating timeouts other than what it looks like maybe like a fellowship at Harvard. You go to grad school at Harvard for a year and a half, but like you went boom, back to back to back. How do you stay energized and keep from burning out?
Yeah. So I took 3 months off between Sense 360 and starting BackEngine. And my goal was actually to take a full year off. I was really ready to take a full year off. And that first month, it was like, oh, wow, this is interesting. I don't really know what to do with myself. The second month, I was like, I think I'm getting into a routine, but I don't really like this. I feel like I just have too much time on my hands. And the third month, I was just itching to start this again because there's something so crazy about being able to take new technology and get the creative juices flowing and build something and put a team together. And it was just like, I remember someone once asked me, if you didn't need to do anything, if money was just not a driving factor, what would you do? And my answer immediately was, I would start a business. It's so fun. And I was like, why am I not doing that? Like, why am I forcing myself to take this time off? And so to answer your question, I get energy from building companies. I think we are so lucky to live in a day in history where so many systems and process, everything is set up to make it easy to start a business. And that doesn't mean it's not risky. It is super risky, but it's also so rewarding and so interesting. And so I get just a lot of energy from it.
It's so much fun. I agree with you. I think it's like a drug, running a business, building a
Yeah,
business. You have to manage it, I think, the same way. Like you can get totally consumed by it, but I agree with you, man. I never get tired of doing it. I never wake up and have a bad day and don't want to go to work. I think we're just
the
wired
best.
for it. It's the best. All right.
Yeah.
Last one. If you had to describe your leadership style in one word, what would it be?
So I do a lot of 360 reviews and I try to get a lot of feedback from the team. What they tell me is my superpower, if you will, is my ability to take feedback. So I really preach what I say and I try to be very agile, whether it's my team giving me feedback, the customer giving me feedback, the market giving me feedback, VCs giving me feedback. I really try to internalize it and adapt. And so we're constantly shifting and adapting and learning. And that's probably the core of my leadership style is I'm trying to get as much input from everyone. And I'm trying for all of us to be really flexible in our approach to things.
I love it. Were you like that in your first business or did you learn that over time?
Well, I was a lot more insecure in my first business. It was much harder for me to take feedback.
Yeah.
I still think I was very good at adapting and I was very agile, but I was much more defensive about feedback.
Yeah.
So
That's
I've
normal.
evolved, I've learned.
Super. Yeah. 3
Sorry,
times in, man. You're a seasoned professional at this now.
we're crazy.
Or crazy. Yeah. We're all a little
Yeah.
kooky, man. If we're founders, you're a little crazy. Ellie, I really appreciated the chat, man. I love your perspective on customers. I love what you're building. And I just love your story, man. So I appreciate you joining us and appreciate the business with BackEngine and the relationship. And we look forward to watching from afar and we look forward to continuing our work together.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I appreciate you guys. It's been really wonderful to work with you and the entire Hiline team and really a fan of what you guys have done. And it's been really important to us as we build out the business.
Yeah, man. Enjoy the rest of the week and weekend, and we'll talk to you soon.
It sounds great. Thank
All right,
you.
man.
Thanks
See
for
ya.
having me.
Cheers.